When a government official refuses to say whether the law still applies to them, that's not politics, that's danger. Because when power stops answering simple questions, truth starts to fade. That's exactly what happened when Congressman Ted Lieu pressed Secretary Rubio with the one question no American official should ever dodge. Do you believe this administration has to obey a Supreme Court ruling? What followed wasn't a clear answer. It was a dance around accountability that left the entire room silent. That Liu's question was simple, even ordinary on the surface. In America, nobody is above the law, not presidents, not judges, not cabinet secretaries. It's one of the few principles everyone agrees on. But when Secretary Rubio began responding, you could almost feel the tension rise. Instead of a yes or a no.
Recognized Representative Lieu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Rubio, thank you for being here today. As a member of the legislative branch, I don't have a special exemption to violate the law. You would agree with me, wouldn't you, that in America, no one is above the law?
Of course.
Okay. And in our system of government, it's Congress that makes the laws, the executive branch that executes the laws, and the judicial branch, when there's a dispute, that says what the law is. Is that right?
Within the context of separation of powers, yes.
Okay. And the reason that due process is so fundamental to America is before we put the entire weight of the federal government and snatch someone off the street, we might want to ask, hey, do you have something to say about that? Might we have the wrong person? And in the case of Mr. Garcia, the Trump administration admitted in court that they mistakenly deported him to El Salvador. The Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, said the Trump administration has to facilitate getting him back. Do you believe the administration has to follow that Supreme Court order?
Well, I don't believe he was wrongfully deported. He's an Salvadorian citizen
That's not
illegally
my question.
in the
Do you
United
believe
States.
that Trump administration has to follow the Supreme Court 9-0 unanimous decision?
Within the context of separation of powers. That
Okay.
No court can tell me how to conduct foreign policy. They can't tell me what I have to say to a president of another country, nor do I need to tell them what I told the president of another country, because I can't
I'm
conduct
just
foreign
asking you,
policy.
do you believe that Trump administration has to follow the unanimous Supreme Court
I believe we
decision?
are following it.
Okay, so my next question is, what steps have you or the State Department taken to facilitate the return of Mr. Garcia, who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
The conduct of our foreign policy is an executive function, and how I conduct
I'm
it,
just
I don't need
asking
to share
you.
with you.
Well,
and
let
I
me
don't
ask you
need to
this:
share with the court.
Have you or the State Department taken any steps to facilitate?
We've taken
the
steps,
return?
but I'm not going to tell you what they are, and I don't have to, because we conduct the foreign policy of the United States, and I can't conduct diplomacy with a
And
foreign
so-
leader if I come to committees and tell you what they said to me,
Right.
what I said to them,
you-
and more certainly a
Now,
court can't
so
tell me to say
you
that
have
either.
taken steps to facilitate Mr. Garcia's return.
We've made those. We've made that assertion, and we've made those assertions in court, and
All right,
we've
thank
complied.
you. I appreciate that. I'd like to ask you now about Ukraine. On August 24th, 2022, you tweeted the following. In the past 6 months since Putin's criminal invasion of Ukraine, Ukrainians have shown incredible bravery and strength as they fight to defend their homeland. On Ukraine's Independence Day, the free world applauds their courage and celebrates Ukraine's sovereignty. And then also in 2022, you said the people of Ukraine are tough people who will never accept being ruled by Putin. I want to ask you, I assume you continue to believe what you said in 2022, right? That we should celebrate Ukraine's sovereignty and that the people of Ukraine will never accept being ruled by Putin, right?
Yeah, that's why we're trying to end the war.
All right. On April 30th, 2018, you tweeted, glad to see State Department confirm delivery of Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. The U.S. should continue empowering Ukraine and other allies to defend against the threat of Russian aggression. You would agree with your prior statement that the U.S. should continue to support Ukraine against Russian aggression, right?
We've supported them more than anyone in the world.
All right. Unfortunately, it appears Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth went rogue and decided unilaterally to stop support for Ukraine earlier this year. Various news organizations reported that Secretary Hegseth paused military support to Ukraine without President Trump's knowledge. I'm going to read you from one article dated May 6. Quote, Pete Hegseth canceled military aid flights to Ukraine just a week into Trump's second term without the president even knowing, according to Reuters. The order initially sparked mass confusion within the administration as national security officials in the White House, the Pentagon, and the State Department couldn't figure out who ordered the halt in flights. This is yet another example of the chaos and lack of cohesion that Hegseth has brought to the Pentagon from day one. Did Secretary Hegseth tell you before he ordered the halt in flights to Ukraine of military weapons.
I can't comment on that because I don't remember that. I don't remember ever hearing that, what you're claiming now.
So your understanding is he never told you he was going to halt these
I
flights?
just know we're providing them assistance now, but the war ultimately has to end.
In 2016, you stated the following: from his repression of the Russian people and the assassination of his critics, to his dangerous invasion of Ukraine and the occupation of Crimea, to his threats against our NATO allies in Central and Eastern Europe, to the war crimes committed by Russian forces, Putin's Russia is a threat to global stability. You would agree with your prior statement, right, that Putin's Russia is a threat to global stability?
I would agree that in my role as Secretary of State, my job is to bring Russia to the table to end the war, and that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to end the war so that more people don't die.
Thank you. And trying to end the war, I simply note that Putin on Palm Sunday launched a barrage of missiles, killed a bunch of civilians. Right before his conversation with Trump recently, he launched a bunch of missiles, killed a bunch of civilians. So clearly, Putin is giving the middle finger to you and to the president. I urge you to defeat Putin on the battlefield. That's the only way to get him to the negotiating table. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes.
He launched into a vague explanation about separation of powers. It sounded like a law school lecture, not a statement of principle. Lieu pressed again. This time, he pointed out something impossible to ignore. The Supreme Court had already ruled, unanimously, that the administration had to correct a wrongful deportation, a man sent to a country that wasn't even his. 9 justices agreed. No dissent, no politics, just the law. So why couldn't Rubio say yes? That's where things got uncomfortable. Instead of answering, Rubio shifted the topic to foreign policy, claiming the court couldn't tell him how to talk to another nation's leader. It was a dodge so transparent, it almost glowed. The question wasn't about foreign policy. It was about something far more basic: whether an American court order still carries weight when it's inconvenient for those in power. And that's where this hearing stopped being routine oversight and became something bigger. You could feel the tension in the room, because what Rubio was really saying between the lines was that court rulings are optional if you can hide behind executive discretion. That's not how democracy works. That's how accountability dies, slowly, one excuse at a time. Lieu didn't let it slide. He followed up with precision. What steps have you taken to follow the Supreme Court's order? Rubio claimed they'd taken action, but refused to say what. He insisted he didn't need to tell Congress, or the courts, or the public, because it was part of diplomacy. That word, diplomacy, became the shield. Every time Lieu tried to get a direct answer, Rubio hid behind it. What makes this moment so revealing isn't just the argument. It's what it exposes about how government can twist accountability into silence. Because if the courts can't compel transparency and Congress can't get a straight answer, who can? That's the question every viewer should be asking. Behind the legal jargon lies a real person, a man named Garcia. He was deported even after the government admitted it made a mistake. The Supreme Court said, "Fix it. Bring him home." It wasn't a suggestion. It was the law. But that simple command turned into bureaucratic fog. Instead of compliance, we got talking points. Instead of empathy, evasion. That's the part politicians never mention, the human cost behind every official statement. It's easy to talk about separation of powers until you're the one separated from your family. Liu's insistence wasn't grandstanding. It was a reminder that behind every policy failure, there's a person whose life is being rewritten by indifference. But that wasn't the only thing Lieu confronted. After pressing Rubio on the Supreme Court issue, he pivoted, fast, to something that hit just as hard: Ukraine. He read Rubio's own past words back to him, the ones celebrating Ukrainian sovereignty, condemning Russia's aggression, and calling for America to stand firm. Then he asked, "Do you still believe that?" Rubio hesitated again. He said yes, but with a new spin. "That's why we're trying to end the war," he said. It sounded diplomatic, but something was off. Because the question wasn't about ending the war. It was about whether America still stood by the values it once declared so proudly. Lieu didn't stop there. He brought receipts. He quoted old tweets, old speeches, times when Rubio was loud about defending Ukraine's right to fight for freedom. Then he pointed to what happened recently. Reports that the Secretary of Defense had unilaterally halted military aid flights to Ukraine, without even telling the president. That revelation hit like a thunderclap. Think about it. One of the most powerful defense officials in the world pausing crucial aid in the middle of a war, without the commander-in-chief's knowledge. For allies depending on those shipments, That kind of confusion isn't just politics. It's deadly. Lieu read the reports out loud. Conflicting orders. Confusion in the Pentagon. Chaos spreading through the national security chain. Then he asked Rubio point-blank, "Did the Secretary of Defense tell you before halting aid?" Rubio claimed he didn't remember. He said he didn't recall hearing about it. Another dodge. Another shrug. The same silence wrapped in bureaucratic calm. That's when Lieu connected the dots. Whether it's obeying the Supreme Court or coordinating military aid, the same pattern keeps showing up: evasion, secrecy, and selective accountability. Each time the question gets simple, the answers get complicated. Why now? The hearing room wasn't just tense. It was heavy. You could almost hear the weight of what wasn't being said. Lieu reminded Rubio of his own words from years earlier, when he called Putin's Russia a threat to global stability. That statement had once sounded resolute. But now, faced with current events and fresh attacks on civilians, Rubio's tone shifted again. He spoke about negotiations and ending the war, as if the threat had mellowed. Lieu closed his remarks with a final push, almost a plea. He reminded Rubio that even as the U.S. sought peace, Putin was launching fresh missile strikes, killing civilians, signaling defiance. "Defeat him on the battlefield," Lieu said. "That's the only way to get him to the table." That moment wasn't just about Ukraine. It was about something bigger: the moral clarity that leadership requires, and how easily it gets buried under politics. When officials start treating oversight as optional, hearings like this become more than procedure. They become a mirror, showing the cracks in how power sees itself. Because this wasn't just about Garcia or Ukraine. It was about whether the people running the government still feel bound by the system that gave them authority. And that's what makes Liu's questioning so important. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't personal. It was structural. He was reminding everyone watching, the Constitution only works if those in power still respect it. When the executive branch begins redefining accountability as discretion, democracy itself starts to bend. Every time Rubio dodged, you could sense the tension between transparency and control, between the ideal of checks and balances and the habit of hiding behind vague statements. And if you look closely, this pattern isn't new. It's been building across administrations, slow, subtle, wrapped in legalese. But hearings like this pull back the curtain, because oversight isn't just political theater. It's how democracy breathes. It's how the truth gets dragged into daylight, one question at a time. When a representative demands to know whether the Supreme Court still matters, that's not grandstanding. That's survival. The scary part? These moments rarely go viral. They get buried under louder headlines, flashier fights, and partisan noise. But they matter more than most people realize. Because if courts can be ignored and officials can hide behind phrases like, "I don't recall," then laws become suggestions. And that's how justice erodes. Not with explosions, but with silence. That Liu's confrontation reminds us that accountability isn't just about punishment. It's about precedent. Every unanswered question becomes a seed for the next abuse. Every ignored ruling sets the stage for another evasion. The system only works when people like Lieu keep forcing uncomfortable answers into the record. And yet, there's a deeper lesson buried here, one about citizenship itself. The Constitution doesn't protect us automatically. It relies on participation, attention, and outrage at the right moments. When viewers tune out, the space between government and accountability grows wider. That's when power fills the void. What can be done? Start by paying attention to the details these hearings reveal: the evasions, the inconsistencies, the unanswered questions. Demand that your representatives press for clarity, because clarity is the foundation of trust. The courts can issue rulings, but only public pressure can force compliance when power hesitates. If the administration truly respected the Supreme Court, we wouldn't have to wonder whether orders are being followed. If the system was functioning as designed, a deported man wouldn't need 9 justices to tell the government to correct its own mistake. And if leadership meant transparency, no official would ever say, "I don't have to tell you what I did." That's why moments like this hearing matter. They strip away the ceremony and show us the raw truth: that democracy's biggest threats rarely come from outsiders. They come from those who believe they're too important to be questioned. By the time the exchange ended, Liu's composure never wavered. But his frustration was clear. The law wasn't being debated, it was being avoided. And that silence said everything. What Rubio's answers revealed wasn't just deflection. It was the quiet corrosion of accountability. When officials start treating court orders as optional, when foreign policy decisions happen in secret, when memory conveniently fades under oath, that's how the rule of law starts to break. But here's the hopeful side. Oversight works when people notice. When the public pays attention, evasions stop being strategy and start becoming scandal. When hearings trend, transparency wins. That's why it's not enough to shake your head and move on. Every citizen has a role in holding power accountable by watching, sharing, and remembering. Because democracy only stays alive when the people watching demand answers from those speaking. So, if this moment made you think twice about how easily the truth gets buried, don't let it end here. There's more to uncover, more hearings that expose what happens when power collides with accountability. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video, not just to boost a channel, but to keep these stories in the spotlight where they belong. Because the day we stop asking questions is the day those in power stop answering them.